they tell me that Mariah had been and she didn't make it. And then we asked about the baby, and they said the baby didn't make it either. And I ran out of that room, and I just threw myself on the floor at the hospital, and I cried, and I yelled, and I was just like, no, not my baby. Like, they took my baby from me.
We know there's still a out there, so no one should feel comfortable. Everybody should be uncomfortable right now until this is found.
On September 6, 2016, a quiet night in Lexington, Kentucky changed for the worst when a bullet ended not one, but two lives in an instant. At around 11 p.m., something shattered the calm routine of the community and left many hearts shattered. A young woman who was pregnant was brutally gunned down in the open. This was 22-year-old Mariah Coleman, an 8-month pregnant woman who, with her dog, was caught in the right place at the wrong time. For her, a single gunshot changed everything, ending not just one life, but two. As urgent 911 calls flooded the lines, detectives were instantly thrown into a whirlwind investigation that would lead them to uncover the murderer and a deep and dark web of conspiracy and crime underneath. This is the life and death of Mariah Coleman.
Something has to be done. Something has to change. The people in that neighborhood are not talking.
This tragic case unfolds in the city of Lexington, Kentucky. It is a vibrant city known for its picturesque horse farms, historic charm, and tight-knit community atmosphere. Locals often enjoy serene parks, cultural landmarks like the Kentucky Theater, and a laid-back lifestyle rooted in Southern hospitality. However, in 2016, the city saw a troubling spike in violent crime, including 28 homicides, nearly double the number from the year before. Various areas struggled with rising gun violence, casting a shadow over otherwise peaceful neighborhoods. While Lexington's beauty and spirit remain, the events of that year revealed the city's growing struggle with safety and public trust. One of such was the death of 22-year-old Mariah Coleman. Born in 1994, 22-year-old Mariah Coleman was a lifelong Lexington resident whose bright smile and gentle spirit had earned her a place in many hearts. Though she mostly kept to herself, those close to her spoke of an intelligence and kindness that quietly radiated through her presence. She aspired to become a mother and was weeks away from realizing that dream. She was so excited to welcome her child that both she and her family had chosen a name for her son, Jacoby. And that was not all. She had already enjoyed her baby showers that were organized for her. Just 2 days before her death, she had shared the excitement of preparing for motherhood, glowing at the thought of meeting her child. Mariah had built a life anchored in family and love. She lived with her boyfriend at the Matador North Apartments on Winburn Drive, where they were waiting expectantly for their son's arrival. She led a calm and respectable life. Nothing in public records suggests she had any involvement in criminal matters. She was a young woman focused on her future as a mother, a partner, a friend. It was September 7, 2016. Mariah stepped out to walk her dog just outside her apartment complex. That routine act of care would be the last time she felt safe, but soon enough, her ordinary evening turned deadly. In the darkness, a shot rang out from an unknown killer with a mysterious intended target. Before Mariah could flee to safety and understand the situation, she painfully realized that the bullets had found a target. Mariah was struck in the back and collapsed right there in the parking lot. Neighbors heard the gunfire and raced outside to help, but the sight they encountered was heartbreaking. Right there, on the ground, pregnant Mariah was bleeding out in the parking lot. She laid motionless beside her small pet, but she was still breathing, and neighbors jumped into action. Frantic calls were made to the police to save her. Minutes later, first responders arrived and rushed her to the University of Kentucky Chandler Hospital. Doctors worked urgently to save her life and the life of her unborn son. They had to face the hard truth. Despite their efforts, the wounds were too severe for her to survive. Mariah was pronounced dead, and Jacoby, who had yet to experience the world, was lost too. Initial confusion and fear grips the community as leaders labeled the killing as senseless and alarming. There appeared to be no motive, no suspect, no explanation. A pregnant woman walking her dog, shot in broad daylight, with no apparent reason.
Police say 22-year-old Mariah Coleman, who was 8 months pregnant, was shot Wednesday night while walking her dog on Winburn Drive off Russell Cave Road. Coleman and her unborn baby later at the hospital. WKYT's Hillary Thornton is live with more from Coleman's family.
Afternoon, friends and family of Mariah Coleman continue searching for answers. Today, a memorial is now set up outside of the apartment complex here along Winburn Drive. It is a spot where many are stopping to pay their respects, and many, when they stop, shaking their heads in disbelief. Balloons, signs, and flowers now sit where police say the 22-year-old was Wednesday night. Friends say she was out walking her dog. Coleman was 8 months pregnant. Her baby, named Jacoby, also unable to survive the shooting. Investigators are asking anyone with any type of information, even if you do not think it is relevant to the case, to come talk to police. As the events leading up to and surrounding the deadly remain unclear, Lexington police say they have as many resources as possible dedicated to the investigation as they work to catch the person or group of people responsible. Family members are seeking justice for the mom-to-be and baby Jacoby.
Will be found because the family gonna do everything. So if anybody knows anything, hear anything, please contact somebody, because this is not fair that a 22-year-old had to go like this.
And police have increased patrols out in the Winburn area, and I can say in the time we've been out here, there definitely is a police presence out here. You can see a cruiser parked behind me over my shoulder right now. That is as officers both continue searching for evidence and also want to help instill a sense of security for the folks out here in this community.
In the midst of the questions, conflicting statements started to emerge. Residents mentioned hearing people arguing across the street. Descriptions circulated of a young man with dreadlocks and a cast sprinting away from the scene. Then, a surprising piece of evidence was discovered. A handgun turned up in a nearby dumpster. However, whether it belonged to the shooter remained uncertain. Despite the disorienting silence and uncertainty, police refused to give up. They canvassed block after block, speaking with residents, urging anyone with information to come forward. Police collected evidence with painstaking care, sending the discarded firearm to the lab and reviewing neighborhood surveillance video. Days turned into weeks as the case strained patience and amplified grief.
It has been, to say the least, a devastating month for the friends and family of Mariah Coleman of Lexington. Someone shot and killed a 22-year-old Xerox customer service rep as she was simply walking her dog late one night on Winburn about a month ago. Her unborn baby, who also died, was supposed to be delivered today. ABC 36's Diane Gerstenfeld has more on the family's fight for answers. It's our top story at 11.
Justice for who? Mariah Jacoby. When do we want it? Now.
Tamara Coleman leads supporters in a call to action.
Justice for Mariah Jacoby.
Marching from the courthouse plaza to City Hall, demanding an explanation for why her 22-year-old daughter Mariah and her unborn baby Jacoby were victims of senseless violence.
Aren't we all tired of burying our children, our grandchildren?
Police say Mariah was an innocent bystander to a nearby robbery. She was out walking her dog in front of Matador North Apartments about a month ago when she was shot in the back. Mariah's family was supposed to be celebrating, welcoming baby Jacoby into the world, but instead they're marching in his and Mariah's honor.
Everyone was so excited to have Jacoby in our lives, and for someone to just rob us of that, you know, it's hard.
Didn't want to get up this morning, but I knew I had things that I had to do, and I still have to get justice for my daughter, so I have to carry on.
Police say they need more witnesses to come forward to be able to solve this case.
You know, somebody knows something. You know, it's just kind of hard for us to believe that nobody saw anything.
At the rally, Mariah's mom launched a petition drive to make her community safer and to prevent another tragedy like Mariah's.
We should not have to worry about being in cold blood in the street doing everyday living activities like that. That's just totally unacceptable.
Meanwhile, Mariah's family was left reeling. Her cousin shared that just days before, the baby shower had been filled with songs and laughter. Now, they found themselves planning not one funeral, but two. A vigil was held beside the site of her death, prayers whispered at dusk, balloons released into the night sky in hopes that justice might somehow follow them upward.
God, we're standing right now, just as men gathered together, all of us here, to show support for this family as they grieve. God, we just want something to happen. God, and we're asking for your direction, asking for your powerful move. God, that as we stand here, that we will be an inspiration for others to do the same, others to stand up and to speak up.
Meanwhile, for the police, a pattern began to emerge in the chaos. It turned out that Mariah hadn't been the intended target. She was an innocent bystander, an unintended victim caught in a web of an entirely different crime. That night, a robbery had spun violently out of control. The robbers got under pressure and had drawn their guns and fired. But then, a stray bullet found its way to the unsuspecting Mariah. But who was this robber? Was there more than one? Detectives discovered that 4 young men, identified as 20-year-old Demetrion Boaz, Joseph Fain, Saquon Freeman, and 21-year-old Skylar Stilgall, had planned to rob a man across the street. As a confrontation ensued, guns were drawn and things went south. 2 firearms, a .38 and a .45, were recovered at the scene. In the tense exchange, one of the robbers fired a shot, believing he was aiming at the robbery victim. Instead, the bullet found Mariah. No longer random, no longer inexplicable, her death was the result of a violent crime she had nothing to do with. An innocent casualty whose life and the life of her unborn son were collateral damage in someone else's criminal plan. As the family absorbed this reality, their grief turned toward a burning need for accountability. How could a pregnant woman be struck down in her own neighborhood, in a place she visited every day? How could a robbery attempt erupt so violently that it took 2 lives? Police would later confirm that repeated interviews, careful collection of phone records and surveillance footage, as well as eyewitness accounts, began to tie the shooting to those 4 men. And soon, a new witness led to a break in the case. One witness placed the shooter as Demetrion Boaz. Investigators, however, decided to proceed cautiously until each statement, each bit of evidence was verified against the others. For a case as sensitive as this one, serious care had to be taken. Until then, the community was left holding its breath, haunted by the memory of a pregnant woman struck by violence that could have and should have been prevented. In the weeks that followed Mariah's death, Lexington police intensified their efforts. Detectives turned to Winburn Drive repeatedly, re-interviewing witnesses and canvassing for anything they might have missed the first time. But investigators weren't relying on luck alone. They turned to the community for help, and slowly the silence began to crack. Interviews with people from the area began producing new leads. Some of the information was inconsistent, but other pieces fit the growing puzzle. Police spoke with someone who had seen the chaos unfold, and they began to zero in on what may have truly happened that night. The young men had arranged to meet another man on Winburn Drive with the intent to rob him of 2 firearms. Guns were drawn on both sides. The would-be victim, Eric D. Kennedy, attempted to flee the ambush. In the commotion, one of the robbers fired a shot. That bullet didn't hit Eric. It struck Mariah, who was nearby walking her dog. This instantly changed everything. It was now no longer a search for a shooter with no motive. It was an active investigation into a failed robbery that turned deadly. Police focused on identifying the men involved. Through weeks of work and surveillance, a name surfaced: Demetrion Lamar Boaz. Then more identities followed: Joseph Fain, Saquon Freeman, and Skylar Stilgall. All were young men from the Lexington area, ages between 20 and 21 at the time. Interviews, call records, and forensic evidence began tying each of them to the scene. And then came the confirmation that pushed the investigation forward. Witnesses began naming names, not just vague suggestions or speculation, actual identifications of who was there and who had done what. As police built their case, they also tracked each suspect's movement in the weeks following the shooting. This proved to be crucial. It showed they were not only connected to Mariah's death, but had also been involved in another robbery on Red Mile Road about a month later. That robbery, just like this one, had turned violent and deadly. Saquon had been shot by a homeowner during the break-in and was left paralyzed. It revealed a pattern of escalating behavior. This wasn't a one-off event. On February 14, 2017, Lexington police announced they were charging Boaz, Fain, and Freeman with first-degree murder, first-degree fetal homicide, and first-degree robbery. A day later, charges were announced against Stilgel. It had taken 5 months, countless interviews, forensic testing, and door-to-door investigation, but finally, 4 names were tied to the act that ended Mariah's life. Detectives believe that Demetrian fired the fatal shot. Eric, the man they had intended to rob, first denied knowing the suspects, but then he changed his mind and saved the case. Eric later told investigators he believed Demetrian pulled the trigger. That detail, combined with the forensic evidence and interviews, helped solidify the case. All 4 men were arrested and held at the Fayette County Detention Center. The courtroom process began soon after. A grand jury indicted them on the full slate of charges: murder, fetal homicide, and robbery. And although investigators believed a 5th person might also have been involved, no additional charges were brought forward at the time. Lexington police held a press conference to share the developments with the public. Lieutenant Albert Johnson, one of the lead investigators, explained how solving this case wasn't just about technology or lab tests. It came down to knocking on doors and getting people to talk. He emphasized the human element, community members coming forward, offering names, faces, and facts. It was traditional police work at its most tenacious. The arrests brought a measure of relief to Mariah's loved ones, but it was far from closure. The 4 men were now behind bars, but the wound left by their actions was still raw. There would be no reunion with Jacoby, no celebration of his birth, just aching silence and a family forced to sit in courtrooms facing the people who had stolen so much from them. Still, with the suspects in custody, the case was finally on a path toward accountability. But justice, as they would come to learn, doesn't always arrive in one clean sweep. The path ahead would involve difficult decisions, plea negotiations, and court hearings that reopened every wound. And what unfolded next would test every ounce of strength Mariah's family had left. As the legal process began its slow crawl toward accountability, Lexington's public gaze turned to the courtroom where justice would take its measure. Almost 8 months had passed since Mariah's life and that of her unborn son were taken in a violent moment of mistaken fate. Now the 4 men charged, Demetrian Boaz, Joseph Fain, Saquon Freeman, and Skylar Stigall, were set to face the full weight of the law. The charges were stark and numerous: murder, fetal homicide, and robbery, each count reflecting the tragic complexity of what had occurred that night. Sentencing hearings loomed, and the community braced for reckoning. It was an emotional day in court when the first plea was entered. Demetrian stood accused of intentionally firing the shot that struck Mariah. Then he stepped up to plea and shocked everyone.
Those guilty pleas, we not only know how long the men responsible for killing Mariah Coleman will likely have to spend in prison, we also know which of the 4 fired the shot that killed her. Mariah Coleman was 8 months pregnant when she was killed in September of 2016. Her unborn son, Jacoby, also. She was an innocent bystander out walking her dog when 4 men were trying to rob another man and shots were fired. Yesterday, those 4 men pleaded guilty to killing her. According to testimony in court, Demetrian Boaz was responsible for the fatal shot. Prosecutors recommended 25 years for murder and 10 for the fetal homicide.
And was there a young woman that was pregnant at the time that was struck by that bullet that ultimately died in her child?
Yes, ma'am, I did not see the bullet.
Ms. Williams, is there anything else?
No, Judge, she was a number of feet back.
Instead of forcing the case to trial, he chose to plead guilty, not only to murder, but also fetal homicide and second-degree robbery. The prayer for mercy was real. The Commonwealth recommended a sentence of 35 years for the murder and 10 years for the fetal homicide to be served consecutively. But the suspects were not done confessing. Joseph and Saquon accepted responsibility for lesser roles, pleading guilty to manslaughter, fetal homicide, and robbery, earning sentences of 22 years each. Skylar, the youngest and not accused of pulling the trigger, pleaded guilty to manslaughter and fetal homicide and received a sentence of 17 years. Minutes before the judge announced those outcomes, the courtroom hushed. Family member after family member rose to speak in impact statements. Mariah's mother, struggling with double grief, described how she'd lost her daughter and grandson within moments. Her words resonated long after the legal condemnation was pronounced, a heartbreaking confirmation that no sentence could truly restore what was lost. The mothers of two of the defendants then rose to speak. They started sharing stories of difficult home lives, their voices heavy with regret and pleading for compassion. But in the balance of justice, the Commonwealth's recommendations held firm. Outside the courtroom, the community response was immediate. Vigils held near Winburn Drive, where Mariah had been walking her dog, became more frequent. Candles, flowers, and quiet tears marked the spot where a life and a future had been extinguished. Strangers and neighbors came together to share stories, to offer condolences, to channel heartbreak, and to resolve. Lexington's leaders called for better street lighting, closer patrols, and more investment in community safety programs. Mariah's story became a rallying cry. A pregnant woman walking a dog in her own neighborhood should never have to face death. And yet, because of that split-second flash of gunfire, 2 futures were lost.
Dozens of people gathered today at Consolidated Baptist Church to say their goodbyes to Mariah Coleman and her unborn child, Jacoby. Earlier today, Consolidated Baptist Church held Coleman's wake and funeral. The family says today is about honoring the fun-loving person Coleman was.
The funeral, held on what would have been Mariah's 23rd birthday, brought the full sorrow to light. Held at a local church, it was a service rooted in remembrance. Photographs of her smile, echoes of lullabies meant for a child she never got to hold. A balloon release followed at the cemetery. 32 balloons, one for Mariah and one for Jacoby, her unborn son. Friends recalled her laughter, her intelligence, and that quiet grace she carried everywhere. They spoke of her excitement at becoming a mother, of that baby shower she had been planning just 2 days before her death. Every detail hinted at the gravity of what had been taken. By the time the courtroom sentences were handed down, Lexington was deeply changed. Neighbors who once walked those streets in the evening carried an unmistakable wariness afterward. Signs lining Winburn Drive now included safety warnings and security cameras. Community leaders worked to build trust between residents and law enforcement, pledging better communication and more visible patrols. Schools in the color districts introduced new modules on gun safety and civic responsibility, taking a tragedy and shaping it into lessons for future generations. In this still healing city, one question echoed above all: why had Mariah been in the wrong place at the wrong time? The answer came not from a killer's pleas or the courtroom's verdicts, but from the fabric of the community she had loved. The best tribute anyone could pay her was to make her death a turning point, never a forgettable statistic in Lexington's homicide count. It was a call to neighbors, local leaders, and officials. Commit to change. Start with better lighting, but don't stop there. Invest in youth programs, conflict resolution workshops, dog owner safety tips, and in every back porch gathering, remind people that even the most routine stroll can become tragic when violence is allowed to roam free. If you're watching this, perhaps you live in a place where light posts are too few, or windows too quickly darkened after sunset. Here's what you can do. Talk to your neighbors. Organize a sidewalk vigil. Contact your local council member to ask for increased patrols or lighting. Support projects at schools that teach community safety. Most of all, take note of who's walking by. Sometimes it's the quiet ones, the ones who hesitate at the curb with a leash in hand, who need us most. Mariah was one of those. And because she crossed a line that ended in tragedy, we owe it to her memory to make sure no one else does. Mariah's future, a child's future, will never come to pass. But justice, community action, and Individual accountability can reshape the path ahead. Let her story push us toward action so that no more birthdays are muted by tragedy and no more futures end before their time.